Okay guys, what I would like to do is very similar to the French Revolution timeline. I wanted to talk through a little bit of the information that I gave you on the Napoleonic period. So beginning in the late 1700s, so, in the midst of the French Revolution, Napoleon is going to gain a lot of fame. He gains that fame through his military expertise and exploits. He is able to start winning battles against the coalitions that have formed against France, and he's also able to defeat the Royalists. And remember, the Royalists, I asked the question here, the Royalists are who? So down here you can see that, who are the Royalists? Well, there is another word that we used for this same group of people, people who wanted to go back to the monarchy, people who were loyal to the royalty, royal families. And what are we talking about here? We're talking about your anti-revolutionaries. So anti-revolutionaries and royalists are the same thing. So Napoleon, in one fell swoop, is able to get rid of both the external threat and the internal threat because of his military ability. And he becomes a superstar because of this. Everybody loves Napoleon. And the relationship with Napoleon and the French people is so highly complex that even at the end of his life, when he's exiled twice, he's fallen out of favor. When he dies, what does France do? But if you remember, they bring him back and they bury him as a national hero. And so there was a lot of love for Napoleon and the things that he was able to accomplish. Down here, 1796, you'll want to know that British forces were giving Napoleon quite a lot of difficulty, and the British that's the one group that Napoleon can never really defeat. Other than that, the only other thing you want to be aware of is that Lord Nelson is going to become a national hero for the British in the same way that Napoleon is going to become a national hero for the French. Both men are very successful militarily, and that's where their fame comes from. Now, this next block, 1799, this one is extremely important because it's going to be outlining how Napoleon actually comes to power. So, after the Directory has proven to be corrupt, the Directory is going to be driven out of power, and a group of 3 men called consuls are going to be put into power. So this is yet another form of government, and it's yet another constitution. However, the term consuls should sound familiar to you if you remember this is coming from ancient Rome. So in France during the beginnings of the Napoleonic period, they are actually resurrecting earlier Roman forms of political power. One of the 3 consuls was, of course, Napoleon, and he is going to then be able to become the first consul and stage a coup d'etat, so a takeover. And how does he do this? He does this through using the same methods that we saw earlier in the French Revolution, particularly the use of rumors and fake news that we saw with Marat spreading a lot of the violence and fervor for the revolution. So he is going to go to the other 2 consuls and tell them that he's heard rumors of assassins who are trying to kill the other 2, and that if they agree to give him power, he'll in turn protect them. And this is very similar to those events that we saw earlier in the French Revolution, using rumors to spread fear. So this block is very, very important. Okay, now the next bit of information, 1800 down here, this block and this information is equally as important. If you look at what this is, 1800, Napoleon starts to expand the French domain. So he wages war now against the other coalitions, and he's trying to spread the ideology of the French Revolution as well as gain more land. And some of the really good things that he brings to the rest of Europe are the things listed here. You need to know what each thing does and what each thing is. So the plebiscite, know that that's allowing local communities to have the ability to directly vote on issues that pertain to them. Now imagine that you're some village in Italy or Prussia or Austria, and Napoleon's coming in and he's telling you that now you're going to be able to directly vote on issues that directly affect you. Imagine how people are going to respond to that. So for many people, he's actually seen as a liberator when he comes in. Not everyone, but in many regions, he is. Taxes and the national bank, he's going to make it finally the case that everybody has to pay taxes. If you remember, this is where the French Revolution begins, with Louis XVI's desire to reform the tax code. Napoleon is the one who eventually accomplishes it. He also stabilizes the economy by creating a national banking system. So very similar to what the Dutch had done, and then even more similar to what England had done afterward. That's from the previous unit. Okay, the next one, lycees. Now these are basically public schools, and this is the first time that the government is really going to support public education, and it's the foundation for our modern systems today. Concordat, this is when Napoleon is going to not only give religious freedom to minorities, but he's going to bring Catholicism back to France as well, without a lot of the privileges that it had had before, but now on a more equal footing with other religious sects within France and all throughout Europe. And then finally, the Napoleonic codes. These were very, very crucial and form the foundation for our modern legal system. They are laws basically that are applied to everyone equally. So it no longer matters whether you're nobility or a serf. Everyone is being held accountable by the same exact laws. And the other thing about the Napoleonic Code, it actually separates out the different branches of law that we still use today: commercial law, criminal law, civil law. So all of this, the foundation for our modern world, basically comes from these 5 ideas that Napoleon is spreading during the Napoleonic Wars. Up above, 1802, this information isn't quite as significant, but you want to know that there are a variety of coalitions, this one being the third, that are going to be forming periodically against against France and Napoleon. They lose, typically. Some of them sign peace treaties, some of them don't. For example, Britain never does. And these coalitions that keep forming against Napoleon are going to be a thorn in his side for his entire reign. Okay, moving on to page 2. On this page, over here, this is an important block, particularly for the influence it's going to have on America. Because Napoleon is waging these wars, and the war throughout Europe, the Napoleonic Wars, are so expensive, he needs to have a source of money. As we talked about in class, one way that he's going to try to get that money is he's going to try to re-enslave the Haitians, take control back so that they can get the income from the sugar plantations. But the other method he's going to use is he's going to sell the Louisiana Territory to America. And he's going to justify this by saying that making America stronger is going to make the British weaker, and that's an underlying reason why he's going to sell the land to America. The real reason was he needed the cash. So that's the primary cause of the sale of Louisiana to America. But you need to know that people are going to be able to take advantage of different European nations during this period of turmoil that's being created by the Napoleonic War. Okay, down here in 1804, main thing you want to make sure you know is that this is when basically the revolution ends, because Napoleon has himself declared as emperor. So no longer do we have the Republic, no longer do we have a directory, no longer do we have consuls, no longer do we even have a limited constitutional monarchy. It's all gone. We're going back to the way things had been done for centuries. He's trying to create an empire with him on the top as emperor. And like I said in the notes here, this is the end of the French Revolution, according to most historians. Up here, Napoleon is going to battle against Britain once again. Britain's still going to be able to hold out. Nelson's going to die, however, making him into a martyr. While that's important, it's not as important as the other information we'll go over. Down here, another alliance is going to form against Napoleon, but by this point, the French Empire controls much of Europe, and you can see the places listed down here. In retaliation, the Brits are going to try to blockade France and that's in retaliation for the continental system. So the continental system was something developed by Napoleon that, because he controls so much of Europe, as you can see down here, so he controls so much of Europe that he's going to try to use that against the Brits by creating the continental system, which is basically going to be a system that says you can only trade with other allies, you cannot trade with the Brits. So he was trying to economically bar Britain from trade. You're welcome. Eventually, this is going to weaken France, and Britain's economy is going to stay very strong due to black market smuggling. So these areas over here that were controlled by France, they're actually going to be engaging in black market smuggling against what Napoleon is asking them to do. And through that method, Britain remains strong, whereas France becomes much weaker. During this period as well, then, and this block is extremely important, so you want to highlight this one. The Peninsular Wars take place, and this is a special phase within the Napoleonic War period, during which Napoleon is going to invade Spain. It's going to be a lot of guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run tactics. This is done anytime that a weaker force tries to go up against a stronger enemy, France being the stronger enemy. And Napoleon is going to lose this war. This is going to be a major turning point. For the first time, he's going to be pushed back, but it's going to take years to do it. Yeah, you can see from 1808 to 1813 this is taking place. Nationalism is rising during this period as well, predominantly because of Napoleon bringing that ideology to those regions.